Hi, it's Naomi Goodlet here. Thanks for joining me. And I'm on the line with Dr. Rick Hanson. Hello.
Hi
He's a
there.
neuropsychologist. He's the author of Buddha's Brain, Just One Thing, and the most recent Hardwiring Happiness. He's a world-renowned authority on self-directed neuroplasticity. Very exciting. And of course, is a mindfulness expert. So I'm honored and thrilled to welcome Rick to speak with me today.
Oh, it's really a pleasure, Naomi. And I always cringe a little at some of those accolades. So,
Yeah.
the two rules of public speaking do sort of apply to interviews: show up and don't suck.
Yeah.
It's kind of a low bar, so we'll try to achieve at least that level. Okay, great.
Excellent,
So,
excellent. Me too.
okay, good.
So I wanted to just dive right in, and because we're talking about mindfulness today, and I would like to get your definition of mindfulness. What does it mean to you?
Yeah. Um, well, you're right. I think it's good to clarify what we mean by the word because it's used in probably three different ways lately, and there are also ways in which it's used in ways that I think are problematic. So, simply for me, I go back to the roots of the word in the early traditions of Buddhism, and even prior to his time, 2,500 years ago, the spiritual and meditative traditions in northern India. So, in a nutshell, mindfulness to me is sustained present moment awareness.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Sustained present moment awareness that's very inclusive, typically. The root of the word for mindfulness in the ancient language of the Buddha, Pali, is recollectedness. So instead of being forgetful,
Mm-hmm.
you're mindful. So there's also usually a little metacognitive quality in the mindfulness in terms of recollectedness that you're aware of being aware. And there's a little bit of effort to sustain this present moment awareness. It's quite easy for people to have present moment awareness throughout the course of a single exhalation. But how about a full breath? How about 5 breaths in a row? How about 10 breaths in a row? That's where it gets a little challenging. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where I start. Mindfulness as sustained present moment awareness.
Yeah, I love that.
Uh, yeah, not my own definition. It's kind of a traditional one, and as
Mm-hmm.
simple we can get it. It's also, if you want, I'll just go on a little bit.
Sure.
It's important to appreciate that mindfulness itself is morally neutral. A burglar could be mindful. There are snipers, soldiers who are trained to be very mindful of their breath, even of their heartbeat. So they'll pull the trigger in between inhalation and exhalation, or even in between heartbeats, right? That's a use of mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we could use mindfulness to be very aware of the traffic going on nearby us, or our child's first steps, on the edge of a swimming pool, or let's say we could apply this mindfulness to our own inner experience. So mindfulness itself is morally neutral.
Mm.
Also, in my view at least, mindfulness is caused by various factors. It doesn't just arise on its own. So it helps to think about what helps us sustain this present moment awareness because it's not our nature. If you think about it, during evolution, animals that were all Zen, they'd take an MBSR, they would listen to my audio tape, whatever. They're all chilled down. Oh yeah, just kicking it here, looking at the light on the leaves. Yeah, tuning into my breath. Whoa, chomp! They got eaten, right? The ones who survived, they were like looking around all the time. What up? Right?
Anxious, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it takes effort, intention, and training to steady the mind. And it's also important to understand that mindfulness can arise alongside other factors. In other words, we can be mindful while radically opening out into every bit of our own experience in a choiceless way. So we're utterly letting be alongside our mindfulness of the ongoing streaming of consciousness. We could also be mindful if we're
Mm.
trying to reduce negative things inside ourselves. We're trying to, let's say, let go of anger or relax tension or stress in the body or abandon some kind of unhelpful, unwholesome desire. And we can be mindful alongside efforts to cultivate good qualities inside ourselves, inner
Yeah.
strengths like determination, compassion, or mindfulness itself. We can be mindful of the process of cultivating mindfulness, as well as you could say cultivating anything, including how to interact with your partner or raise children more effectively. And I think sometimes people these days, maybe just to finish my little riff here, They make two kinds of mistakes, in my view, around mindfulness.
Yeah.
One is that they think that mindfulness is equivalent to choiceless awareness, open awareness. And so if you do anything but choiceless awareness, you're not being mindful. But in fact, we are to be mindful under all conditions, driving cars, eating our lunch, having a nice chat with a nice person through Skype, and we're to be mindful while we let go of the negative and while we grow the positive. So it's not a violation of mindfulness. It's not in conflict with mindfulness to have other things present in the mind. And the second mistake I think that people make is that they think mindfulness is all you need. Just be mindful. That'll take care of everything. And mindfulness is fantastic. I'm a complete fan of it. I teach it. I practice it. Great. But mindfulness alone is not compassion. Mindfulness alone is not the development of self-worth or commitment to social justice or skillfulness in raising children or being or running a business. Right? Mindfulness alone is not enough. Even if someone is great a fan of mindfulness of the Buddha, allocated 7 of the other 8 elements of the Noble Eightfold Path to more active, deliberate, effortful ways of engaging the mind, like cultivating wise intention or wise view or wise speech or wise effort, etc., etc., etc. Okay, that's good. That's my blather. That's enough for right now.
Yeah, it's so interesting that we fall into those traps of thinking we're not doing it right. Yeah. There's so many things I'd love to ask you based on what you've just said, and something that I truly I really love about your teachings is that you include this aspect of generating positive feelings, and you invite us to enjoy life more just by internally creating things. And I'm trained in ACT, right? I feel like ACT, this is just an area that ACT is really missing out on. And your meditation actually from Stress Proof Your Brain around generating feelings of being loved and appreciated by people around you it's one of my favorite meditations. I just love it. And so I just wanted to offer you that feedback and say I think it's so vital to include that aspect of mindfulness, and like you say, also to include compassion, which is like just creates that whole, because mindfulness on its own is great and it's a great practice, but there's these other aspects that fit in really nicely with it that really complete the package. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for saying that, and I promise my response here will be much more succinct. So a couple of things here. So first off, let's just do it like this. Think about whatever. I'll just do the whole thing. Okay, here we go. Ready?
Go.
So, as you probably know, as a therapist, right? The fancy term for it is the stress diathesis model. It's this basic idea that a person's course over a day, a year, or a lifespan is caused by 3 factors. Just 3 things: challenges, vulnerabilities, and resources. The combination of those. And if challenges or vulnerabilities rise, so must resources in order to deal with them. All 3 of those are important, but what's usually the area that we have the most influence over, it tends to be resources, growing resources. Okay?
Yeah.
Resources exist out in the world, in your body, in your mind. All 3 are important to grow. Whether it's money in your bank account out in the world, or a better healthcare system for your country, or resources in your body like good nutrition, getting enough sleep, eating well, etc., or resources in your mind like self-confidence, or, as you were saying, feeling loved and feeling cared about. Well, again, growing resources in all 3 areas is important, but which one do we have the most influence over? It's usually the mind. So that's a lot where I've been focusing. How do you grow those resources in the mind? Yeah. How do you help people acquire secure attachment in terms of psychology, or develop the executive functions that enable them to control their attention, or impulse control, or self-regulation, or compassion, or loving kindness, or equanimity, or insight or self-awareness? How do you grow this, or happiness or gratitude, etc., etc.? Well, if you're aware of the brain, you realize that growing these resources, these inner strengths, let's call them that, is a matter of changing the brain for the better. Okay, so now we're zeroing in on the bullseye. How do you change the brain for the better? And 10,000 or more studies on animals and human animals, as it were, show that the process of changing the brain for the better, which means learning or working with memory, kind of all three ways of saying more or less the same thing, that process of changing the brain for the better is a two-stage process that moves from experiences held in short-term memory buffers, this moment of calming in the body, this moment of feeling strong, this moment of feeling entitled to have your own voice heard in a meeting, whatever it might be, or this moment of gratitude, this moment of delicious physical pleasure, eating some luscious fruit, whatever it might be. Short-term memory buffers are representing that experience in the moment. And for it to have any lasting value, it needs to be transferred to long-term storage. That's the two-stage process. It moves from state to trait, or from activation to installation. Both are really important. So where I've been going with all this is that if we care about growing the good stuff in ourselves, for all kinds of reasons, healing, everyday well-being and effectiveness, self-actualization, even spiritual growth, or we're interested in growing the good stuff in the brains of our children, our clients, our patients, our colleagues, etc., right? It really behooves us to pay attention to activation and installation. What are the states that are present in the mind, for better or worse, and then in particular, are we installing the good ones? In other words, are we taking this moment of insight in therapy, or the experience, let's say, of just accepting ourselves as we are, or a moment of feeling loved or cared for by other people, or relief that something we worried about didn't really happen and we have a tendency toward anxiety, whatever it is, are we actually installing it in our brain, changing neural structure and function? Because if we don't install it, it was worthless. It was momentarily pleasant. It wasn't worthless in that sense. But otherwise, in terms of a learning curve, any kind of growth, any kind of learning, any kind of takeaway, any kind of lasting value, there's no impact if we don't install our experiences in the brain. In other words, we grow the inner strengths, the good stuff we want to have, happiness, love, wisdom, inner peace, contentment, etc. We grow that by having experiences of those inner strengths, activated states of those inner strengths, which are then installed in neural structure. That's how you grow the good stuff. You experience it and then install it, right? And the dirty little secret of mindfulness training, psychotherapy, and I'm talking about myself here, raising kids, coaching, human resources training, and businesses and all the rest of that. The dirty little secret is that we're bad at installation. Yes. We tend to skip the installation phase. We just assume that if we're having some kind of groovy mental state, somehow it'll sink in. But it doesn't, in part because the brain has this negativity bias, that you're aware of. I say it makes the brain like Velcro for the bad, but Teflon for the good. Yeah. In other words, we got a brain that's very good at turning negative states into negative traits. But it's bad at turning positive states into positive traits, even though turning positive states into positive traits is the way to grow the good stuff inside ourselves. Yeah. So long story short, for me, what's been really important is to appreciate that the primary pathway to growing the good stuff inside ourselves is through having beneficial experiences of the inner strengths we want to grow. And most of those experiences, right? And second, I've become, much more, I would say, personally aware of the importance of, noticing the positive experiences that we're having, because there are opportunities to take it in.
Yes.
Like notice the good facts around you, let yourself have a good experience, and let it really sink in. And it's also completely okay to deliberately create useful, beneficial states of mind. I mean, that's fundamental to mental health and, trauma recovery, coping in everyday life, self-actualization, and spiritual growth. It's okay to deliberately call up our experiences, positive experiences. There are pitfalls with that. And I think Stephen Hayes and ACT and and John Kabat-Zinn and non-dual teachings and these various sources have a good critique of the pitfalls of over-striving, turning your life into a project or turning your own psyche into a big project. On the other hand, there are a lot of pitfalls with people just sort of sitting on their hands going in, out, in, out. I've known a lot of people who are really good at witnessing their own psychology, and they're as neurotic as ever. They haven't changed. Or I know people who are very good at meditating. They can, meditate all day long, but they're still really difficult to live with, work with, sleep with, or all the above.
Yeah.
So to me, it's important to be able to do both things. In other words, to just utterly let go of this moment of experiencing without any kind of clinging, while simultaneously, out of sort of, a clear-eyed view of the world and your brain's tendency to be like Velcro for the bad but Teflon for the good, while you're letting go of your experiences and not clinging to them, simultaneously opening to whatever is wholesome and kind of helping it sink into yourself. In part because as you repeatedly internalize the felt sense of your core needs being met, core needs for safety, satisfaction, and connection, as you repeatedly internalize that, the basis for craving gradually falls away. You increasingly don't go to war with what's unpleasant as you feel more and more full inside. Increasingly, you don't chase after what's pleasant, my precious, and increasingly you don't cling to relationship experiences because you already feel loved enough. You're still very engaged in the world, but on the basis of an increasingly unconditional well-being.
Yeah, I love that. And could you maybe talk us through the installation process, because you're talking about letting it sink in or internalizing this good stuff. And could you maybe give us an example or step us through how we might apply that to ourselves?
Yeah, great. So let's say there you are, you're at work or you're at home, and somebody is caring toward you. And it could be a fairly small thing. You're at the deli getting your sandwich or salad, and you're joking with the people behind the counter. Or your child runs up and goes, "Woo, Mommy, I love you." Or
I wish my daughter would do that.
Yeah, well, they will eventually. They take a while. Anyway.
Sorry, keep going.
No, it's good. I relate. Trust me. We got a daughter and a son, young adults. So let's see, or whatever it is. Maybe your boss said, "Hey, good job. Yeah, thanks. That was good. Appreciate that." Okay. First of all, notice the good fact.
Yes.
All kinds of good stuff is happening around us. Wing! We don't even notice it. In part because of the negativity bias, keeps us scanning for the lion behind the bushes, right? Or the bad thing that might happen. So notice more of the good facts of life. I don't believe in positive thinking. I believe in realistic thinking.
Yeah.
Seeing the whole mosaic of reality, much of which is fantastic. Like, here we are talking. You're 10,000 miles away. This is Skype.
That's right.
It's free.
It's
you have a
phenomenal.
nice little scarf. Yeah, like, whoa, what up? You have a nice scarf on.
Oh, thank you.
I have color vision.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh.
Right now we're breathing stardust. The oxygen we're breathing was born inside the heart of an exploding star earlier in the history of the universe. Like, okay, crazy. All right, notice some of the good facts around you.
Yeah,
Second,
they're everywhere.
feel something. Again, a lot of people, they're noticing stuff around them. Oh yeah, the light works. Oh yeah, I turn the, I flush toilets. That's pretty amazing. Or, oh, you're nice to me, but we don't feel anything. So let yourself feel something, which goes to the issues a lot of people have with opening a positive experience. A lot of people are much more willing, actually, to have a negative experience.
Definitely.
Sadness, fear, shame, anger, on disease, on discomfort, than they are to actually stay with feelings of happiness or worth or relief or feeling cared about, right? So let yourself have it. And then third, take it in. So this goes to kind of, I summarize all this by 4 words: have it, enjoy it. Have the positive experience in the first place, usually because you're already having it. You didn't manipulate your mind, you didn't create it. There's a place for that, but usually you're just already, like, I could do this right now. Like, I could tell you like me. We're not best friends, right? We just kind of met face to face here, but there's a nice feeling. I could let myself have that experience. What's it like to feel reasonably liked, in a basic human way, or respected, appreciated? Great. I like you too, by the way, in
Oh,
an
thank you.
authentic way. Yeah. And then, okay, so good. So have it, and then enjoy it. That's the installation phase. So activation is have it, it's a state, and then to make it into a trait, enjoy it for 10 or 20 seconds in a row.
10 to 20 seconds.
As you know, there's this famous saying, neurons that fire together wire together. Okay? Yeah. So we just want to get those neurons firing longer and more intensely and in more ways. So just stay with it. Here we are having an experience, or here a person is, feeling cared about in some way, large or small. Let it last. It's a secret private event, kind of stay with it, enjoy it, protect it. You start to realize that to do this, you also need some other factors, like getting on your own side, being a friend to yourself.
Yeah.
That's really important. So you protect these experiences. You create a kind of sanctuary for them in your mind. That's one reason why mindfulness training is so helpful in terms of positive neuroplasticity, which is what I'm talking about. Because to be able to do this, you have to be mindful of the states you're experiencing in the first place. And second, you have to be mindful of the process of installation, helping this experience get encoded, gradually woven into the fabric of the brain and therefore your life. Okay, so actually I'll just summarize them quickly.
Great.
There are five major factors of installation. And again, this is based on thousands of studies on the neuropsychology of learning. Any one of these factors helps. Mo better. That really summarizes everything. Mo better. More episodes of wholesome states of mind that become woven into yourself as wholesome traits. And inside episodes, mo better. More engagement, so more depth of learning, more return on investment from that particular episode in which you're taking the good. So 5 factors, well known. First, duration. The longer those neurons fire, the more they wire. Okay, stay with it. Second, intensity. Try to open to it. Let it grow inside you. Give your mind over to it. Let it pervade the mind. Even a subtle experience like tranquility or gratitude or some subtle insight can actually fill your mind and be intense in effect by filling your mind. All right? Or like, what would it be like right now, honestly, to feel my genuine appreciation for you and interest in you, and let the experience of feeling that someone enjoys you, let's say, you're on the spot now, Naomi, what's it like to let it be intense? Like, that's a skill, okay? So let it be intense.
Yeah.
And then third, multimodality, that's the third factor of installation, where you just try to feel it in your body and emotionally. There's a place for internalizing useful ideas, like, I need to drink moderately or not at all. That's a useful idea. Or, they're never going to promote me in this job, I need to look somewhere else, right? Could be a useful idea. But usually where the action really is around emotion and sensation, and also motivation, in terms of multimodality. So you let the experience be as felt as possible, you come into your body with it, that'll help it install. Fourth factor is novelty. The more we see what's fresh or new in our experiences, or we look at them through the eyes of a child, the more they will sink in. And the last factor is salience or personal relevance. Why should I care? Why would it matter to me, let's say, to feel more cared about by other people, to fill the hole in my heart left that's the result of, let's say, a childhood in which I wasn't that cared about, or I didn't feel that cared about. Any single time you do this won't change your life, but 10 or 20 seconds at a time. That's what I'm really talking about here in most cases. It's nice to really marinate in it, but usually people do this 12, 2 seconds at a time, and they usually do it in the flow of everyday life. They're just interacting with somebody, it feels good. They take a moment to really let it land, to be intimate with it, to be vulnerable to it, to be receptive to it. But there's also a place for doing this in more formal ways, like at meals, or on first waking or just before sleep, or at the end of a meditation session, or a mindfulness class, or at the end of a therapy session, or during class for children in school, after they come back from recess, or just at the end of the day before the bell rings and it's time to go home. So it's okay to do this in formal ways as well. And you can use this for mindfulness training. I think mindfulness training is really synergistic with cultivation, which is what I'm talking about
Yes.
here, the deliberate growing of strengths. And also, the deliberate process of cultivation can help steepen people's learning curve when they're going through mindfulness training, so that they can register more, oh, this is what it feels like to completely accept whatever's flowing through my mind. Oh, this is what it feels like to step back from the pain in my knee or my back and not be so, or my reaction, to this thing that happened at work today, to step back from it and witness it rather than being identified with it. Oh, that's a state.
Yes.
That disidentified witnessing is a state. I can let that sink in and get installed too. So my learning curve going through MBSR or MBCT or whatever it is that people are doing gets steeper and steeper. Also, the fruits of mindfulness practice can also be internalized. For example, becoming more self-aware, I start to notice when I'm getting irritated, and because I'm mindfully aware of my growing irritation, maybe my back hurts, maybe I haven't had enough food, I don't know what, maybe Jupiter is in Venus and Pluto, Scorpio rising, I have no idea. But anyway, something's happening. But because I'm mindful of it, I'm less likely to get hijacked by my rising irritability when some little trigger comes along and then I put my foot in my mouth and it's a world of trouble. So when people internalize the fruits of mindfulness training, that makes them more motivated to sustain their training and keep being mindful.
And just on that, I really quickly just want to share a story that I experienced just this week, actually. That exact thing that you're saying, where you notice something negative coming up, and for me, I had the first mindful, really sort of serious incident of my life, and I noticed that I had reacted to it mindfully rather than in those old patterns and habits. And what happened was my daughter was running around and she crash landed into my face, and she head-butted the bridge of my nose, and I heard a snap. And I was terrified. I ran off, and it was, but the entire process was I was very aware of my thoughts, and I was very aware of what was happening in my mind. And the first thing I thought of was, I need to be safe. And so obviously I was having this reaction to there's danger, and I needed to be, I ran to the bathroom and I wanted to be by myself, and so I had this, I need to be safe. And then I was in shock, and I couldn't really, my husband was trying to talk to me, and I couldn't really understand what he was saying because I was so upset. And he said, I'm going to call an ambulance. And that penetrated what was going on, and I thought, it allowed me to check in, and I said, no, I don't need an ambulance. I'm okay. And that allowed me to come back, and I was in shock, so I lied down for a few moments, and I noticed all these thoughts running through my head, and I was thinking, I've got a conference next week, I'm going to have a broken nose. There's no way I'm going to be able to do all these things tomorrow. This is a disaster. I'm going to have to go to hospital, and what if I can't eat the food in the hospital? Just all this stuff was spiraling that normally or previously I would have been buying into and then feeling worse and worse and worse and worse. But as it was, I was just really present with the experience. And once the shock had died down and I put an ice pack on my nose, I was completely calm and fine, and the entire process, even though it was a negative thing that happened, I was able to go through that entire experience being very present and open to it. And I learnt so much about those natural thoughts that just come up in my mind, and that I don't need to buy into them and give my power away to them. Yeah, I just wanted to share that with you because it's very exciting for me.
How long ago did that happen?
About 3 days.
Wait, are you okay? Is your nose broken?
Yeah, no, I'm completely fine.
Okay, great. Well, good for you, Naomi.
Yeah.
What a beautiful story. That's great.
And just to finish off, I was wondering whether you could recommend a technique that would be really good for people who are just starting out with mindfulness. Yeah.
Well, a couple things. One is to explore what's enjoyable about sustained present moment awareness. Let's call mindfulness that for our purposes here.
Yeah.
Find what's enjoyable, how nice it feels to be present, to be actually arrived in this moment of your one wild and precious life, as the poet Mary Oliver puts it. So if you open to the ways in which mindfulness is enjoyable or rewarding or useful, like you were saying, it was useful, you'll be more motivated to do it. So that would be one thing, I would say. And, you know, exploring things like the kind of peacefulness that tends to come when we're more observing what's happening rather than getting caught up in it. Also, you know, the sense of the body tends to relax as we sort of disengage from getting all pressured and stressed in life. So that would be one thing I would suggest. A second thing I would suggest is to make a commitment, as I have, to meditating 1 minute or more a day. In other words, and when I say the word meditation, I mean it really kind of broadly. It's some sort of formal mindfulness practice that is yours that you make a commitment to. So maybe it's 1 minute a day of slow stretching. Or maybe it's 1 minute a day of literally practicing putting, you know, in your living room for golf, right? But you do it very mindfully. Or maybe it's sitting and doing the Lord's Prayer over and over in your mind, with a lot of sustained present moment awareness. Or maybe you sit down, you kind of let your eyes close or keep them open while you stay with the physical sensations of breathing in the body. Right? So do something that's formal, that's real for yourself, 1 minute or more a day. And that will tend to train your steadiness of mind, so it'll be easier and easier to string together those mindful moments throughout your day so they become, you know, more and more continuous.
Yes.
So I would say that. And if you like, I'll give you a little trick from neuropsychology.
Love it.
It's very neat, actually. A lot of brain science is not very relevant to psychotherapy or, you know, self-help or mindfulness practice, whatnot. But there are a few things that are. I think probably more than a few. I think one of them is this point about the negativity bias and the ways in which we've got a brain that's vulnerable to over-learning from the bad and under-learning from the good. That's a big bing, bing headline, you know, that's worth paying attention to. But here's another one.
Yeah.
So, kind of succinctly, and people can learn more about this if they want. They can go to my website where I have a ton of stuff freely offered, rickhanson.net. And I've, for example, lots and lots of PowerPoint slide sets from workshops I've taught. And this material is in the slide set section called Being and Doing, if they want to look more. And there are lots of other resources on my website that are freely offered. Okay, so quick bottom line. If a person is kind of thinking away about themselves and lost in thought and fantasizing about the past or ruminating about the future, worrying, or, you know, working that angry conversation they had in their mind, like what I should have said differently. There's a lot of activation of networks down the midline of the cortex, the outer shell of the brain, right? On the other hand, if people are in just present moment awareness, just kind of being here, also with letting go, not caught up in the past, not caught up in the future, not trying to figure anything out, just being here moment after moment after moment, they tend to activate neural networks on the sides of the head, especially on the right side of the head. For right-handed people and roughly half of all lefties, and the other half of the left-handed people, it's reversed because they have language on the right side. But the point is, these are so-called lateral networks rather than midline networks. Okay? So then the question becomes, if you're interested in mindfulness, and you're interested in mindfulness training, and maybe you're interested in deep states of present moment awareness, well, you would want to know, how do you activate those lateral networks on the sides of your brain that support open spacious awareness? Okay? So what are some of the things that help activate those lateral networks? There are several things, but one in particular is what's called Gestalt awareness, where we have a sense of things as a whole. And a great place to do that is with your own body. So let's suppose that someone is practicing mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of the sensations of breathing. Right? Typically, the way people do it is their attention kind of skitters from one point in the body or another.
Yes.
Or you could say a little differently, one point or another is foregrounded in awareness for a half second at a time or a second or two, and then boom, there's some other part. Or they totally focus on one particular sensation as a concentration practice, such as the sensations of breathing at the upper lip. Mm-hmm. Okay? All right. Well, that's fine, but what a person can do is, kind of scan the sensations of breathing in the body for a minute or two to get some familiarity with them. And then start, let's say, with the center of the chest, being aware of the chest as a whole as you breathe. In other words, not moving from sensation to sensation in the chest, but all the sensations in the chest known at once as a single unified percept, a single unified gestalt. And, so just take your time with it. For many people, me included, it takes a few minutes at least to sort of get a sense of this. But once you do, you start to recognize it. It's like, oh, the chest as a whole. It kind of helps to relax and soften awareness, and just, if your mind wanders, come back to it. And then once you get a fairly small area in your chest as a whole, broaden it to your whole chest, and then the whole torso, including the stomach and the shoulders, diaphragm, and then move out to the whole body breathing. So the whole body is taken as a single unified percept. You're abiding as a body breathing, as a whole body breathing. And it may take a little bit of training, a few times doing this, but once you're able to do it, you start getting good at it because you practice it. Neurons that fire together wire together, so you become more skillful at this mode of consciousness. And as you do, it's very powerful. And you could take it one more step where you just take all of your experience as a whole. It's one single unified percept, no part of which is more prominent than any other part. It's right. And when you get out too, your experience as a whole, that's actually a fairly deep meditative state. And for those who have any interest in this, it's one of the 5 major factors of the non-ordinary states of awareness, where it's an aspect of what's called the unification of consciousness or singleness of mind. That's one of the 5 major factors of the so-called jhanas, these deep non-ordinary states of consciousness that are the right concentration element of the Buddhist Eightfold Path. I don't say that because I'm trying to pitch Buddhism or persuade anybody. I'm just saying, for those who are interested, that this kind of Gestalt awareness, particularly going all the way out to experience as a whole, not just body sensations, but thoughts, emotions, desires, sounds, sights, all the rest of it, the totality of and awareness as part of mind as a whole. It's to realize that when you go out to mind as a whole or experience as a whole, that's a really pretty powerful state of being. That you're not in Kansas any longer, as it were, in terms of the Wizard of Oz. You've really gone someplace pretty important. So that would be a thing for people to play with.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it just drops you into present moment awareness. It's hard to get your knickers in a twist. Little things don't seem so important to you anymore because you can go out to your experience as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've followed along with you just then, and it's amazing. My words have completely gone because I'm still there. And I did notice a tendency to flit around and to go, oh, here's my leg, or here's my heartbeat, or here's this thing. But then once you come back to it, you just connect, and something happens, and everything just fades away, and you rise above it.
That's great, Naomi. You got it. Yeah,
beautiful.
A metaphor that could help people is to think of awareness as like a stage, and attention is a spotlight. So what we pay attention to is in the foreground, under the spotlight. But there's a background awareness, like there's a air conditioner running in the room I'm in because it's California and it's hot. So there. Well, what we do when we do this kind of Gestalt awareness process I'm describing is you widen the spotlight so that gradually includes the whole stage of awareness.
Beautiful. I love that so
Yeah.
much. And I'm sure that everybody listening will as well. We're so grateful for your time and all of your incredible information today. And I will link to your books on this page. I highly recommend that you read everything that Rick has written. And I also highly recommend that you subscribe to his newsletter, which I'm a huge fan of, because he sends out amazing bite-sized little pieces of information that will just transform your life. Once a week, is it?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's called Just One Thing. It's
Yeah.
a practice. Each week there's a little practice. Oh, there you are. And I even have a book of practices
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah.
The one this week, I don't know when this video will post, but the one this week, just to use as an example, is be on your own side.
Yes.
Right? Naomi, if it's okay, I'd just like to mention something I'm doing that might be interesting to people.
Please go ahead.
In October 2014, I'm starting this year-long program called the Foundations of Well-Being, where each month we'll explore one of the 12 pillars of well-being, starting with self-caring. The second one is mindfulness. Notwithstanding the things I said about it, I'm a huge fan, of course, of mindfulness, including the work that you're doing. And this program is incredibly inexpensive. It's $25 a month. We'll give just about anybody a scholarship as long as there's any kind of need. We want all kinds of people to do it. It'll be chock full of resources. I'll be doing 2 hours of presentations every month. We'll be having experiential art activities for people to do. And each month we'll have one or more guest experts like Tara Brach, Jack Kornfield, Barbara Fredrickson, Stephen Porges, the creator of polyvagal theory, and his wife Sue Carter, who's probably world's expert on oxytocin, the hormone of love, etc., as well as all kinds of other really amazing people, Dan Siegel, Gretchen Rubin on happiness and so forth. So people ought to check out that program. I'm really excited about it. And one thing that makes me really excited about it is that it's so cheap, including, if you're broke, you can do it for free. Great. So check it out. The Foundations of Well-Being.
I'll link to that on this page as well so that people can find out more information. And is there anything else that you'd like to add in closing about mindfulness?
Yeah, my hope, honestly, is that we get a critical mass of human brains in what I call the green zone, where they're still engaged with life, but on the basis of that underlying unconditional well-being, that I was talking about earlier, that's not so dependent on what's happening inside yourself. And mindfulness is an absolutely key resource to be able to deal with life in a rich way like you did. Okay, there you were, your daughter hit you in the face. It was real life, right? So, and you can just imagine how badly that could have gone for you and for her and your family and all kinds of things in lots of other situations. But for you, that mindfulness was a kind of shock absorber. It helped you stay present with the experience, not overreact, helped you manage your own reactions to it. Obviously, that's a key aspect of getting 1 billion brains on green. That's my kind of goal. 1 billion brains in the green zone. I think that's a critical mass, right around that point. It'll be a tipping point. And I think that's a key aspect, that tipping point, 1 billion brains on green. It's a key aspect of helping our world come to a softer landing in a generation than the one it's currently heading toward.
Yeah. Well, I would love to help you on your quest. And I think that the more we talk about mindfulness and the more people have the opportunity like this to practice it and get some exposure to it and give it a go, the more likely we are to achieve that goal.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Well, thank you, Naomi. This was great.
It has been great. It's been an absolute honor of mine, and it's been. I'm a huge fan of yours, and I wasn't expecting you to agree to be interviewed by me, but I'm so honored that you did. And thank you so much for all of your wisdom and insights today.
Well, it's a pleasure, and honestly, it was a very conscious choice when I looked at your invitation, and I thought to myself, she's great. This is great. Let's do this.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
And my point in saying that is not like I'm special, because I just don't feel special. I'm just doing what I do. It's to say to you, what you're doing is really good, and you're really good in the way you're doing it. And I hope you take that in.
I absolutely am, to the point where I'm completely speechless now. Much appreciated. And I think it's all just about spreading the word, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And to me, it's just helping people, offering more and more widely.
Yeah, well, you're doing great work in the world, Rick.
Thanks.
Much appreciated.
Well, bows to you and everybody.
Likewise. Yep.
Best regards.
All right.
Okay, take care and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.